Hi, this is Eternal King bringing you another LOR video today. So I want to talk about, I think, the deck that provides people the most trouble when they're transitioning from Standard to Eternal. And that is, a lot of the time people complain about Azir Aurelia. Um, that is one deck that I think I've already covered on the channel. I provided a tutorial and kind of run through some of the strengths of the deck. One of the decks I've been getting more into lately is Temple. I think Temple is exceptionally good at one thing and one thing only, and that is punishing standard play patterns. Essentially, the way that standard players who are high ranking play in Eternal is that they jam up the board with a lot of followers that don't really do anything and then will open pass. Um, basically forcing resources out of the opponent, making them commit to something, essentially just trying to irritate them out of the game. That works very well in Standard where cards don't do anything. And then the best way to win is not to do anything yourself. They call it like the Allen Pass. I think it has a nickname. As a top 100 Eternal player, from Canada, yeah, my perspective has always been the opposite for this format, which is it's much better to do things than not do things. And this is where Temple comes in and why this deck gives people so much trouble. It does a couple things exceptionally well. So starting off, everything in the deck cycles. We know this, but that's not new. Something like Swain Nora, everything cycles in that deck too. But again, you have the cycle power. It exists. You have Pool Shark, and then you updraft the Pool Shark card with Temple Caretaker, or you Zonite Urchin, the card from Pool Shark. Then you play your Nilla, and then Nilla attacks, and you get a Slipstream in your deck. And, you start rummaging cards that have that are fleeting, and blah, 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 blah. And you play this, and you get more Slipstreams, and then you TF blue card. All of that stuff, you're doing doesn't really matter, but you're blocking the opponent's aggression while you're doing that. Potentially Mystic Shotting, very problematic cards. If your opponent plays a problematic landmark, you have Aftershock to remove it. My version runs the 2 gotcha over the 2. It's basically a buff card that provides increases the damage of your units, but I prefer the gotcha. It's like, I just give me the removal. It's Suit Up, yeah. So I remove Suit Up. I understand what it's in the deck for. Suit Up is supposed to go on to TF to protect him and let him live longer. Personally, I don't really care about that. I play this as a control deck, so I just run the gotchas. I just want the more removal. But yeah, so you do all that, and then you jam Temple. And like, that's the whole deck. It's just like blah, 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 TF on 4, Temple on 5. That's really only problematic if your deck isn't doing anything. Obviously, TF auto levels after the pass turn. So basically, if your deck cannot accomplish anything by turn 5 and does not have an answer for the landmark by turn 5, chances are you're going to lose that game. Given that Eternal is basically like MTG Modern, that is fine. I don't see it as a problem. So let's talk about, some of the things that you can do that are successful against Temple. Because again, if I got to top 100 ranked, I had to kill Temple quite a bit. Like, it's not a deck I didn't run into. I was just lucky when I was climbing. It was a deck I had to kill. So talking about ways of doing that. Well, we have Explore cards, right? You can tech Explore cards in your deck. There's a variety of Explore cards. Every single region combination has an Explore card that will generate you landmark removal. And there's also a lot of spells in the game that double as landmark removal. Things like Aftershock, which can even be pulled off of Tellstones. So you don't even need to hard tech the Aftershock. You can include a Piltover Tellstones. So things like that are very, very good into Temple. Other things that are good. Well, actual win cons, big overwhelm units, elusive decks, aggro decks, rally based decks, Azir Aurelia is a token-based deck. You know, all of these things are exceptionally good into dealing with Temple. And so, like, you think about it, and basically, if you play Emperor's Dais, then you play Azir, um, and then you just start swinging out, and you play something like Blossoming Blade on turn 5 by the time they play the Temple. You should have enough token aggression going into the opponent's chump blockers that you're in a good position to win that game. That you should just be able to get enough tempo and aggression going that you win that game in most cases. If you want, you can even like define Tance the TF, and again, if that, because that's providing you an extra attack, and that's like okay. Things you shouldn't do: going all in on like a Green Glade duo, going all in on a sparring student when there's so many pings and mystic shots and stuff is probably less good unless you get protection for them. The Azir is always going to be a safe bet. There's nothing the Temple can do into an Azir play. And if you play the Emperor Dais, they might spend 3 mana to remove it, but that's kind of okay too. And a lot of the time they just won't have it. So, you know, this is a deck that can do well into Temple if you play it right, which again, it's all about playing it right. Akshan does exceptionally well into Temple because he's just going to have like all the keywords. He's going to have Spell Shield and all the keywords into the level TF. Or you can drag the TF with Merciless Hunter. But yeah, you can Enrage Fire Spitter, you know, the TF. There's just a lot of things that you can do. Strikes, you have like nothing but strikes in this deck that kill the TF. So like you do need to play decks that do things into the Temple matchup. And if you play decks that don't do things into the Temple matchup and you're playing standard LOR, you're going to have problems. You're going to have significant problems. You know, you could play something like Monoshrema and flip Sundisk and like do okay into Temple. You can play Thralls and do okay into Temple, but it's very, very important that you play highly synergistic champion-based decks. Something like Tentacles. You know, Tentacles can do okay into Temple because you just tentacle smash the TF and then you're swinging with big overwhelm damage, and without the level TF they can't stop Illoy at fast speed, and Illoy just swings for 1,000,000 overwhelm damage, so that does pretty okay into Temple. But you do have to kind of flip the script. Draven Rumble will do okay into Temple because Rumble has Spell Shield and Might, you know, all of those things are fine. Nora Swain will do fine into Temple because you should have enough removal options. You have the Scorched Earth, you have enough cycling power, enough cheap removal, plus the boat win con at the end that you should do okay into Temple. But it's very, very, very important that you play decks that do things. That's the best advice I can give you into that matchup. Even something, you know, if I grinded out the aggro matchup, for example, and, you know, the best thing you can do in a Temple is 3 1-drops. You know, if you're an aggro player, and again, you know, I'll speak from experience as a top 100 aggro player, the best thing you can do in a Temple is just 3 1-drops, right? Mana 1, mana 2, 3 1-drops, swing, and just, you know, stack up that face damage as much as possible so that by the time they attempt to flip TF, they're in decimate range. That's really easy. If you want like brain dead easy ways of beating Temple, you kill them before they start going off. But you know, I would think that Zed would have a pretty decent matchup. Like Zed with just like some sort of protection spell swinging should do pretty okay. I think most of the time Gwen, you know, doesn't really need the protection because she has 4 health, but that's just hard enough to remove. So like there are so many decks that rally and do things and provide aggression, and like there's so many different types of decks that are great in Eternal. If you are getting blown out by meta Temple, you are building decks that are not doing things flat out. And you know, I'm not saying that there isn't room for do nothing decks in Eternal. I think they have a very specific place. That place just is usually, you know, plat or silver ranks, in, you know, usually plat, right? You know, I think Grappler is hard stuck at plat right now in Eternal. Sunny might be hard stuck at plat in Eternal right now. because they can't, they've forgotten how to deal with this format. And the format has changed. The format's always changing. Every time they release new cards, formats change. But yeah, the only way to beat Temple is to, again, play a deck that does something. Play Lurk, right? Lurk should do pretty well in the Temple. It has a rally-based mechanic. It can swing on every turn, and everything that swings has huge, massive attack numbers. So Lurk should do pretty well. So those are just examples. Remember to play decks that do things into Temple. And that really deals with kind of the most problematic, what people call the most problematic deck in Eternal. I don't personally think so as a top 100 player. I think the deck is good into one very, very specific thing and not great into a lot of other things. And I even play it differently. I know a lot of people who will just like spam out the Mariners. I don't really care about Mariner. It's there if I need the blocker. It's like if I see someone play like a card that it attacks well into, or that it'll block well into, I'll play the Mariner. But most of the time I'm just cycle spamming, TF, Temple, what you got? And then people are like, oh wait, damn. And it's like, okay buddy, well you're memeing, so have fun. GG, have fun basically is what this deck should be called. But yeah, that's Eternal King signing out. Really happy about the way the format's shaped up. I don't think anything in the deck is broken or unbalanced. It's just that you do need to be playing at that higher tempo speed. And if you play ladder right now, the tempo is exceptionally high. Decks play very fast. So if you don't match that with like auto level decks and auto kill decks and like just auto rally decks and massive token decks and like all the things that are available in the game, if you're not playing at that tempo and if you're not playing on that level, you're never going to get there. But you can learn. That's the big thing I will say. This is Eternal King signing out.